Private Yeth Corrun had exactly 4 seconds to decide whether he was about to die of embarrassment or die of something considerably worse. "Sir," he said again, louder this time, voice cracking over the comm, "I need you to confirm the target coordinates, because the system is telling me we just dropped a full invasion fleet on schedule, Private," snapped General Korrath Vess, his 4 mandibles clicking with irritation as he studied the tactical display. Sol 3. Blue-green world, primitive orbital infrastructure, minimal military presence. Textbook soft target. Now stop wasting my time and confirm the landing zones. That's the problem, sir. Yeth's hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped his scanner. Sol 3 isn't on the soft target registry anymore. It was flagged for removal 6 months ago. I just never saw the update go through until now. Flagged by whom? By everyone, sir. Every species in the Threshold Accord flagged it. There's a note. Yeth swallowed hard. It just says, "Do not engage." Korrath's mandibles stopped clicking entirely. On the view screen behind them, the Vantor's Reach, flagship of the Zhurnaii Hegemony's 7th expansion fleet, 400 vessels strong, veterans of 31 successful annexations, hung in high orbit above a world that, according to every scrap of intelligence Korrath had personally approved, should have offered no resistance whatsoever. Then the world's dark side lit up, not with weapons fire, with light, thousands of individual points, activating in a pattern too precise to be coincidence, too fast to be anything but a response the hegemony's own sensors hadn't detected it forming until it was already too late to stop it. "Sir." Yeth's voice had dropped to something closer to a whisper. "I think they've been watching us arrive since we entered the system. No one on the bridge expected what happened next. Every long-range sensor aboard the Vantor's Reach went dark simultaneously. Not damaged, not destroyed, simply and deliberately switched off from somewhere outside the ship, as though someone had reached in through their own systems and politely turned down the volume on their situational awareness. A single channel opened, uninvited, patched directly through what should have been an impenetrable command frequency. A calm human voice, almost apologetic, filled the bridge. "This is Coordinator Anya Petrova, Earth Defense Liaison. You're currently occupying restricted orbital space above a treaty-protected homeworld. I'd like to resolve this peacefully, but I need you to understand something first." "And what?" Korrath said, forcing steel into his voice despite the cold dread spreading through his chest. "Would that be?" "You're not the first fleet to make this mistake," Anya said. "You're just the first one in 11 years. Private Yeth Corrun, watching his general's antennae go completely rigid, understood in that moment that he had just witnessed the exact second his commanding officer realized. They had made the worst tactical error of his 400-year military career. 3 days earlier, none of this had begun as a crisis. It had begun as a clerical error so small that nobody thought to double-check it. The Zhurnaii Hegemony's Expansion Bureau operated on a simple, brutally efficient scheduling system. Soft target worlds, primitive, poorly defended, strategically valuable, were queued for annexation on a rolling 6-month calendar, with fleet assignments generated automatically based on distance, fleet readiness, and projected resistance. Sol 3 had entered that queue 9 years earlier, flagged during a routine long-range survey, as exactly the kind of primitive, high-value target the hegemony specialized in absorbing quietly and efficiently. What nobody in the Expansion Bureau's scheduling division had properly cross-referenced was the update filed 6 months prior by the hegemony's own intelligence directorate. A single line, buried in an otherwise unremarkable quarterly report recommending Sol 3's permanent removal from all active target lists. The report hadn't explained why in any detail anyone below command rank had clearance to read. It had simply stated, with uncharacteristic bluntness for hegemony bureaucratic language, "Further engagement not recommended. See Threshold Accord Archives, Incident Designation, Corvann Silence." General Korrath Vess, a decorated commander whose confidence had been earned across 3 decades of genuinely impressive military successes, had approved the 7th Fleet's deployment to Sol 3 without ever seeing that report. His scheduling officer had approved it without seeing it either. By the time anyone aboard the Vantor's Reach thought to check why an otherwise unremarkable blue-green world had been so thoroughly flagged, 400 warships were already committed to an invasion. Nobody in the fleet actually understood. That wasn't even the worst part of the oversight. The worst part was that Earth had known they were coming for 6 days before the fleet ever arrived. "You said we're not the first fleet to make this mistake," Korrath said carefully. once Anya Petrova's channel remained open and no weapons fire had followed her introduction. Explain, 11 years ago, a Vossari raiding fleet made the same targeting error you just made, Anya said. Different circumstances, similar outcome. They found us on an outdated target list and arrived without realizing the designation had changed. We gave them the same courtesy I'm giving you now. Full transparency, before anyone made a decision that couldn't be undone. And what happened to them? They chose not to listen, Anya said, and for the first time, something harder crept into her calm voice. I'd rather not repeat that outcome today, General. I don't think you would either. Korrath studied the tactical display, watching 400 of his own ships sit utterly exposed above a world, whose defensive capabilities he suddenly, urgently needed to understand. What exactly, he asked, makes this world different from every other soft target your species' neighbors have catalogued? Anya was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried something Korrath hadn't expected from a species his own intelligence reports had, until 6 minutes ago, described as barely post-industrial. We're not different because we're stronger than you, she said. Ship for ship, your fleet could probably still win a straight engagement. We're different because we stopped optimizing for straight engagements, about 40 years ago. Everything changed in the next few seconds, because that was when Korrath's tactical officer, voice tight with disbelief, reported that every one of the Vantor's Reach's 400 escort vessels had just detected weapons locks. Not from orbital platforms, not from a visible fleet, but from small, hardened installations scattered across the planet's surface and its surrounding debris fields, positioned with a patience that suggested they'd been waiting there for years. Not days. We don't build fleets to fight your fleets, Anya continued. We build defenses that make invading us cost more than any reasonable commander would ever choose to pay. You can still leave, General. Right now, that's the only outcome I'm interested in. Korrath had built his entire career on decisive action, and the temptation to prove Anya Petrova wrong, to demonstrate that 400 Hegemony warships couldn't possibly be intimidated into retreat by a single calm voice and some well-placed ground defenses, burned hot enough that he nearly gave the order to engage. What stopped him wasn't fear. It was Private Yeth Corrun, still standing at his console, quietly pulling up the full text of the Intelligence Directorate's buried report, the one nobody had bothered to read before committing an entire fleet to this system. Sir, Yeth said, voice unsteady but insistent enough to cut through Korrath's anger. I found the Corvann silence file. Summarize it. 11 years ago, the Vossari fleet coordinator Petrova mentioned. They didn't retreat. They engaged. Yeth's voice dropped lower. Sir, there's no surviving record of what happened afterward. Not one ship. Not one transmission. The file just ends. That's the entire incident report. It just ends. The chamber's earlier tension curdled into something closer to genuine dread. Nobody knew what humanity was actually capable of. Korrath realized. Not because Earth had hidden it, but because every previous fleet arrogant enough to find out firsthand had never survived long enough to file a report of their own. Coordinator Petrova, Korrath said, forcing the words out through mandibles gone stiff with something he hadn't felt in decades. What are your terms for withdrawal? No terms, Anya said simply. Just leave, correct your target registry, and make sure the next fleet that gets assigned to Sol 3 actually reads the file before they arrive. That's all we've ever asked. The Zhurnaii 7th Fleet withdrew from Sol 3 11 hours later, having fired not a single shot, having lost not a single ship, and having learned, more thoroughly than any tactical briefing could have taught them, exactly why the Threshold Accord's most cautious species had spent 9 years quietly urging every neighboring power to leave the blue-green world alone. Korrath Vess submitted his own report to the Hegemony's Expansion Bureau 3 weeks later, recommending Sol 3's permanent removal, not just from active target lists, but from consideration entirely, under any future circumstances. His final line, quoted for years afterward across a dozen species military academies, as a case study in the cost of underestimating an opponent, read simply, "They didn't defeat us with strength. They defeated us with patience so complete that by the time we understood what we were facing, the only victory left worth having was the one where nobody had to die, to prove a point neither side needed proven." Private Yeth Corrun, promoted to lieutenant 6 months later for the report that had likely saved the entire 7th Fleet, kept a single memento from the incident pinned above his new station. A printed copy of Coordinator Anya Petrova's final transmission, 4 words long, that he read every morning before his shift began. Ride the file first.